Right, I'm doing this video in case you needed to catch up on this or if you just wanted to go through it again. I've got a normal file here, it's just a polyplane on the ground here. I've got a load of cubes that are all identical, and in the background I've got an HDRI which I've downloaded from Polyhaven. HDRIs are pictures which have a lot of light information saved on them, so it will actually calculate this light coming through here and use it to illuminate the model. It'll also calculate all the bouncing light that will come off things and influence the colours and amount of luminance on each object. So I'll try and get through this fairly quickly, right? You've got Maya materials and you've got Arnold materials. Maya materials, these are the three you'd usually use. You've got Lambert, Blinn and Phong. Lambert is a matte material, which means it appears quite dull. It's not got any sheen to it or anything like that. So if you want to apply a material, we go into object mode, we right click, hold it down, go down to where it says assign new material, let go of it, and we'll get this. I'm keeping it on favourites at the moment. These are all the different types you can choose. Well, we'll stick it onto Maya and we'll use Lambert, right? Now the Lambert is a little bit brighter than the rest of them, that's absolutely fine. And on the right hand side here we've got the attribute editor, and you just make sure it's on Lambert too. And at this point you really want to start naming all of your textures, because you can reuse these for other items, and so it's a lot easier if you name it with what it looks like. So I'm going to click on this colour bit, I'm going to move it to green here. In fact, I'll do it here instead. I'm going to go to green, so this is the hue, which is the colour. This is saturation, which is how green it is. And this is the value going from dark to light. So I'm going to do like a mid-green for that. And I'm going to come here now, and this is where you can rename it. So I'm going to call it mid_green. I'm going to call it matte, because it's a matte colour. Okay, so that's that one. Click on this one. I'll show you in a minute how these render differently. I'm going to put a Blinn on this one. Right click, assign new material, Blinn, and do the same thing here. And I'm going to change the colour of it. We'll have like a greyish pink, and we'll call this shiny pink. Okay, click on this one, hold down the right mouse button, assign new material. This time we're going to use Phong. You got Phong and you got Phong E. You can sort of see by the highlight the difference in them, in how shiny they are. So I'm just going to use Phong. I'm going to do this one red, or maybe a bit, yeah, that'll do. Red colour. I'm going to call this one red_v_shiny, so it's very shiny. When you name textures, you can't use spaces, so you just use underscore, or what you could do is capital letters. So yeah, in fact I'll do that. So red, capital, shiny. Shiny. Can you see? It's quite easy to read. Right, so brilliant. We've got three textures. They look all exactly the same in this viewport. So we need to render them. And rendering is where it takes all the light in the scene and it shoots it out, and it calculates what happens when it bounces into these different objects and scatters everywhere. So to render, we're going to go into this Arnold tab here. I'm going to click on this eyeball, and it'll bring up this render window. Then all we need to do is press play. And the first time you do this, it might take a little while, because it has to actually it basically makes these texture files out of everything it sees. And once it's done that though, once it's made the texture file for the first time, if you open it up again, so I'll show you again, open up again, and it's more or less instant. So I'm going to press play, and I'm going to orbit around my scene. I'm going to have a look at this. Right, so let's do it so it's facing the light. So I'm going to click on this and press F to focus, and we'll have a look at that. So it's very matte in that there's no highlights on it. There's obviously faces where it catches more light, but it scatters it evenly. And you'll probably be able to see some static. This static is it basically working out the quality of it. If at the end of a render, when you've finished it, which this one has done, because you'll see a little progress bar there, when it gets to 100, if it's still got some static in it, it just means you need to turn up your render settings. But it's a bit of a trade-off on how high you put the render settings and how long it'll take to actually render it. So for this, it's absolutely fine because it's given us a good idea of what it's going to look like. Click on this next one, press F to focus on that, and again I'm going to orbit around. And as you can see, it's starting to reflect this tabletop, and it's also starting to reflect the other materials. So can you see? We can see the green reflected. So this is the Blinn one. It's quite nice. It almost works a little bit like a mirror. And then finally, I'm going to go onto this one, onto Fong. So I've just clicked on it and pressed F. We'll go around there, and this is even shinier. Beautiful. Incidentally, when you're in this view, usually when you zoom in and out, it's just going to zoom in and out of the picture, so it's going to just show you the pixels and stuff. You can change that. You can go to Windows, 3D manipulation, and you can actually just use the same keys that you'd use to navigate, but inside this window. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes if you just want to zoom out of the picture and not the scene, it can it can make a mess of your composition. Right, so that's those. And there's a couple of more things I just want to go through. So, if you want to reuse these materials anywhere else, so let's say we really like this green one, I'm just going to move this out of the way. I can apply this green one to this and to this if I wanted to. So I'm going to click on this one, I'm going to right click, and instead of going to assign new material, I'm going to go to assign existing material. And as you can see, they all stack up here. This is why it's really important to name them. Otherwise it'll say Lambert 1, Lambert 2, Lambert 3 and that type of thing. So I want to find the mid-green matte and let go, and it'll assign it to that. What you can also do is you can go onto face. I'm going to click on this one, hold down shift, double click its neighbour, and I can assign a different material to that one. So shiny pink for that. In fact, why not, let's go around this way and we'll put the green on that one. So again, existing material and mid-matte green. And this is a really good way actually of showing you how these react differently to light. There's not a massive amount of difference between Blinn and Fong, but there is a huge difference. I'll just let this settle down. Can you see between Lambert and Fong? Because obviously Lambert's absorbing the light and Blinn and Fong are transmitting it, reflecting it I should say. So those are the Maya ones. There are more, but we won't bother going into them. I use these when I just need to stick a quick texture on it. And the better one to use is Arnold's materials, so it's AI standard surface. And you apply it in much the same way, but it's got a lot more. The benefits of it is it's all three of those first ones in one material. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to right click, assign new material. I'm going to click on Arnold here, so it just narrows down. You can just get Arnold in this main area, but you have to get through all the other ones as well. I'm going to come down here and go to AI standard surface. Be very careful you don't have standard hair or standard anything else. AI standard surface, right? And for this, I think what I'll do, so I can rename this. I'm just going to call this red 1. Doesn't really, I'm just naming it just for the sake of naming it, because it's just good to get into the habit. I'm going to click off it. I'm going to click back. So all of these are different nodes, and the texture node's always on the end. So let's try and find my render window. So I'm going to bring this up by pressing on the eyeball. I'm going to press play. Okay, so this is what the standard surface looks like. It's got a bit of gloss to it, but we can change that on the fly. So I'm going to click on this, and we're going to go here. Now base is just the actual colour of it. So we've changed this, before, so I can put a red on it. It's quite a nice red, that. We can then, if we go to specular, specular is specular are the sort of reflections that come off it. So the thing we can alter with this is specular roughness. So at the moment it's got a tiny bit of roughness to it, 0.2. I'm going to drag this all the way down to the bottom. And if you can see, again, let it render. A bit difficult to see that in some ways, but you should, yeah. Can you see it's become very reflective? Now if I bring this roughness right the way up, and if you just watch the render view, can you see? So we've gone from very shiny to very matte. Now there's loads of other stuff you can do with these, but this is already why they're so much better to use. So I'll bring the roughness down to about halfway. I'm going to perhaps try metalness. So if you bring this up, the more you bring this up, the more it reacts like a metal. Now as you can see in the viewport, it turns it black. That's normal. So hopefully, yeah, you've got a metallic sort of tinge going on here. Perhaps what I'll do is I'll bring the roughness right down. Yeah, there we go. Can you see? So this looks like it's basically a lump of red metal. Now in your viewport, if you don't like seeing it like this, you can always switch it onto just default material, which will render it as grey. It won't affect the render though. Should have mentioned this at the start. If you do want to see these colours and stuff, you need to take it off that and onto that. This is textured. Right, what else can we do? So let's do this one. New material. Go to Arnold. Standard surface. You can get it to transmit colour. You can put a coat on it, so it's almost like car paint. You can put sheens on it. Luckily there's some presets which I'll show you in a minute. But one which is pretty cool, we can go to emission and we can get it to emit colour, almost like a light. So what I'll do, first of all I'm going to change the actual base colour, so the standard colour that it is. I'm going to do an orange. Okay, so we've got an orange there. Now we're going to come down to emission. I'm going to change this, and I want it to emit a yellow light. If you're getting it to emit light, there's no point in it emitting a muddy colour because it just defeats the object. So you want something that's quite bright and a fairly intense colour. You can't really tell the difference now. That's because there's no weight to it. So whenever you drop the weight down to 0, it basically makes it it just turns it off. It's like a ramp. So if you wanted to ramp it up, you can do. And in fact, if you even drag the colour ones, it'll make it darker or lighter. Anyway, so we'll come right back to emission, and this time we're going to turn this up. And what you might find is it actually starts to glow. Especially you can see it bouncing the light off there. Now, just because it goes up to 1, it doesn't mean that you can't do more than 1. So I'm going to drag over it and go to 5, press enter, and as you can see, it's getting even shinier. And we can go up to 10 if we want. Perhaps we won't go too high with it because it'll probably end up bleaching the colour out. So that's on 20. No, it's still doing a pretty good job. So that's actually illuminating the scene, which is pretty cool. Okay, well I might as well leave that one there. You notice you'll get a lot more static around here because it takes a lot more processing power to sample it. And basically what happens is it's got a finite number of samples that we've told it to do. So if we say 7, it will do 7 runs of that, if that makes any sense. We can go into the settings. So the settings are here, right at the top of the screen. It's a clapperboard with a cog on it. I'm going to click onto this. I'll show you very quickly. If I go over to system, at the moment I've got GPU selected. So it's a graphics card. It's going to render directly from the graphics card. I can change that to CPU. CPU generally does give better renders, but they usually take a fair amount longer. So the good thing about the GPU is you can get something that's 90% as good way quicker. But anyway, I'm going to go over to Arnold Renderer. At the moment, we're only on 3 samples. So this is camera anti-aliasing, and with the graphics card, it only uses this top one. If I change this now to CPU, and you see that it actually renders it different. It goes in a spiral. Now when we come here, we've got all these different things. So diffuse colours, specular, transmission, subsurface scattering. So if you've got something with a lot of specular, you might want to up the samples on the specular. And you won't be able to hear my computer's fan kicking in, but it has done. And so it's gonna work that out. So you do end up with a much cleaner picture. But to be honest, for what we're doing, GPU is good. So with GPU, if you want better quality, you just bring that up. So I've gone up to 8, and it's done it already, which is pretty good. So if I wanted to, so hope I don't crash it, I'll just put it up to like 15, press enter, and we can see down here, yeah, it's still going pretty quick. Lucky I've got quite a decent computer. See, so the more samples you get in, the less noise it'll create. But we can also put noise filters on to help it. Right, I'm going to bring this back down. We'll put it at about 5 or 6. I'm going to close that down. So as before, I've not renamed this. I'm going to call it glowing. As before, I can go onto here, assign existing material, and choose glowing. Right, so I can reuse the same material over and over again. Next, I'm going to show you some of the presets that Arnold Standard Surface comes with. So here's my next scene. I've got a different HDRI in this time. These HDRIs can all be adjusted for brightness and things like that, but we'll leave this as it is for the time being. So let's start applying some of these Arnold materials to this chest piece first of all. So I'm going to right click, assign new material. I'm going to do the same as we did before. I'm going to go to AI Standard Surface. So I can just keep going down here, but can you see it's got every material in there? So if I click Arnold, it's just going to filter it by Arnold materials. AI Standard Surface, right? And this time, instead of, we can name it there if we want, but I'm just going to go through this quickly. I can click on a preset. And basically all these it's just using all of these different settings, because there's probably half a dozen different settings we can choose, but these are all been set up so they make use of them. So I'll try copper with this. I'm going to go replace. Now I can't, it's come out as black because metallics and glasses always come out as black. I'm just going to do another one on here. New material, standard surface again, and in fact let's go to presets. I might as well just use presets. Should be a plastic one somewhere. So plastic, replace. Let's make sure that we've got this checked, textured, and let's just open up the render window and press play. Okay, so this first one I've done as copper, and it works pretty nicely. Second one is as plastic. So if I click on the plastic, no, in fact, if I click on this copper one and go to the actual texture, you can see these have all been pre-populated with all the settings for this. So you've got things like incidence of refraction, which is how much light's reflected and how much of it is allowed to transmit through. And if we go onto the plastic one, this is AI Standard Surface 2, so I've not renamed it. Can do if I want, call it plastic. As you can see, it's got all of its own different settings attributed to it. So it's a really quick way of getting some quick and dirty textures onto your model. So let's go over to here. I'm going to click on this and I want to make this into glass. So I'm going to do a new material. Arnold Standard Surface. I'm going to go to presets. I'm going to go to glass and go to replace. So now this has rendered this as a sheet of glass. It's slowing my computer down a bit because it's got a lot more calculations, because we've got transparency and all sorts. Now, just because this is a preset, it doesn't mean that we can't alter it. So for instance, on specular, so the roughness of glass, it's a very smooth glass, but sometimes unless you've got a lot of light reflecting off it, you don't get it can almost look invisible sometimes. If you get it in the right type of lighting, it's alright, or when you get a bit of a sheen on it. But what you could do, for instance, is just put a tiny bit of roughness in it. to make it ever so slightly more opaque. So if I look at this now, this is almost like Perspex that's been out for a little while and it's got a little bit cloudy. I can bring it up further and make it almost like a frosted glass. So just because the presets, it doesn't mean that you can't mess around with them and change stuff. Let's click on this. I'm going to give it a new material again. So all I'm using is Arnold Standard Surface. And this preset, I'll show you the chrome. So we've got chrome, which we can replace with. And chrome is so shiny, it's basically like a mirror. So you could almost use it as a mirror, to be honest. So that's now an extremely shiny metal. Again, if we wanted to, we could go and, well, you could turn the metalness down and see what happens. It sort of dulls it a bit, does it? Yeah, it sort of hazes it up a little bit. But again, we could turn the roughness up a bit and make this metal a little bit rougher. So it's just having to work on this. It's taken a while. I'm just going to check my render. That's why. This is set for CPU. But you can see that, so it's metallic. So you've got a load of control. And again, if I wanted to make this into the same type of glass, I'm just going to check on this. So I've not named that, so I'm going to call it glass. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to go assign existing material glass. Can you see? And now this renders as a piece of glass as well. So that's more or less it. I've probably forgotten a load of stuff, but never mind. So you could really very quickly populate your entire scene with just these textures. And for instance, that plastic one that we've got on there, right, just because it's blue, you don't need to keep it blue. We can have whatever colour we want. So yeah, that's Arnold's Standard Surface. And for this one, I've just opened up another scene of this cabin. This has also got an HDRI, but it's pretty subtle, it's almost like a bit foggy. And I've put a ground plane in on this as well. So for this one, I'm going to show you how to attach photographic textures. So I'm going to go into Google Chrome and I've gone on to Polyhaven. Polyhaven's really good, it's a load of free textures that you can download and use. So I'll use this brick wall. Now these textures have got many different texture maps assigned to them, which we'll look at in a future episode. But for now, all we want is just the actual colour of it, the base colour. So if I click download there, it's going to do the whole lot of them. But if I go onto here, I can just choose the diffuse. Diffuse just means colour. So I'm just going to download that as a JPEG. So I'm going to right click, save image as. Now what we need to do is we need to locate whereabouts this project is. So you should have set the project first. So I'm going to go onto here, I'm going to go onto here and here and here, go onto my models folder, and where is it? Texturing intro first years. I'm going to double click in this, go to source images, and I'm going to put this in source images. Click save. Now the reason I've done that is if I then go and work on a different project and I come back here, it's still going to look in the same place for the texture, so the texture won't go missing. This will become apparent when I actually start plugging in these textures. Right, so this is how we're looking at the moment. As you can see, the HDRI is actually putting a little bit of colour onto this, so it's quite nice, it's subtle. Right, let's texture this chimney. I'm going to click on this chimney and I'm going to do Control and 1, and that'll isolate it in the viewport. Right, I'm going to assign a material to it, so I might as well do a standard surface. So I'm going to right click, new material, Arnold, standard surface. I'm going to make this rough because it's going to be brick and I don't want shiny bricks. But what we can do now is any time you see one of these checkerboards, it means that you can plug in something to it. It makes a new node basically. So I'm going to go to colour and I'm going to click on this checkerboard, and this option comes up. You've got loads of different things you can put on here, but I'm going to choose file. This is one that we're going to be using most of the time. So I click on file, and now it brings me over to here. I've got file and I've got place 2D texture. So when I go into file, it will come up with a little folder here. I'm going to click on that, and what it's going to do, it's going to open up my source images folder, which is why you need to throw them in here to begin with. So that's one that I want. I'm going to click open, and in fact I'll turn my textures on in the viewport, and this is what we've got, which is a little bit of a mess at the moment. Like, some parts of it look alright, it's trying to follow the contours, but as we go up here it's a bit of a nightmare. Just want to show you a couple of other things. If I click off it and then back onto it, I can come back to here. Let's rename this brick, and if we don't like this photograph on anymore, because can you see now, instead of a checkerboard, we've got this, which is like it's an arrow pointing to the next node. So if I click it, it's going to take me back through to that file tab there and the place 2D texture. So let's say I wanted to get rid of that. Whenever I want to, you need to break the connection. So you go over the color or weight or whatever it is you've plugged it into, you right click, break connection, and that resets it. Okay, so I've just pressed Z to go back. Now the problem with this is, let's show you the UV editor. So I'm going to go up to here, UV editor, and this shows you how Maya, let's make sure we've selected this object. That doesn't seem so good to me. Okay, let's go create automatic. And what this will do is, these textures are, we've got 6 cameras more or less set up. I'm getting a bit jumbled here, aren't we? We've got 6 cameras. Each of these is going to, so imagine this camera here, oops, came off that. This camera is going to be firing the texture at this wall. This camera is going to be firing a texture towards here. This bottom one is firing towards here. This one is firing towards here. So it actually does a fairly good job, and this is what we call, these are just types of projection, because you have to project a texture onto it. If you imagine this being a wall, and you want to, and you've got a projector and you want to project an image onto it, you have to think about how many cameras you'd need to actually project onto this wall. So this is like Maya's lazy way of doing it for you. So what it's actually done is it's cut all of these UVs into UV shells. So the whole thing is a UV, and these little individual pieces are what they call UV shells. They're different to faces, although they look very similar because they're attributed to the faces. They're actually not. So I could grab all of these and delete them. The model's still there, see, but it just doesn't have anything attributed to it. So I'm going to go into object mode. I'm going to go create automatic again. Now there's different types you can use. If you've got a cylinder, you can use cylindrical, and it's going to attempt to use a cylinder which will project it like in a dome shape. We could go on to create camera based. Camera based is going to basically shoot the image at it, depending on where your camera is situated. So if I do it again, if I do it from like up, see the camera base, because we couldn't see the top of it, it's not bothering to texture it properly. So I can do it again. Create camera based, and now see it's shooting the texture onto there, but again if we tilt it back the other way, it's all stretched and nasty. Now these are just to get you some of the way there, so let's just go back to automatic. Right, so we've got that. This one here is the wrong way around. So what we can do, we can right click and make sure we're going to UV shell, because these are shells. And I can use the same, or I can select it on here if I want, go to UV shell, so that's selecting it in the viewport. So I've highlighted that, that's selected now. I can actually just go into E for rotate. I'm going to hold down J so it snaps, and I'm going to rotate this by 90 degrees. And can you see? Now it's facing the right way. Hopefully you can see that, or you'll definitely be able to see it here. Now if I want to, I can move this up or down, and as you can see, let's get this one up here. As you can see, the texture is going to respond to that. So it's just saying, put this brick texture on this face here. We can overlap faces, so faces can share the same texture, it's absolutely no problem. What we can do as well is I can press R and I can scale it up. Now as I scale this up, it now contains more bricks, doesn't it, in this square area. So can you see the bricks in the render appear much smaller? So it's a bit weird when you first start doing this. It might take you a little bit of time to get used to it, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good as a starting point. So maybe I'm going to fix this one as well. So I'm going to go into UV shell, select this one. Again, I'm going to rotate it, hold down J to snap it to angles, and do it by 90 degrees. And already we're getting something which is fairly okay, really. That one needs sorting, but I think you get the picture. Now what we can do is we can change the amount of times the UV repeats all over the whole thing. I mean, you could grab all of this and scale it up, but I wouldn't really recommend it. By the way, with these UVs, these textures, so the texture always comes into this central square, and all of your parts of your model that you want to be textured in this way need to stay inside this square. It's a UV space. Right, let's come off this. I'm going to go into object mode, and we're going to go back to this brick texture, and where it says color, we're going to click on this arrow, and it brings us to this file. So we could change it for a different file if we wanted to. We could open that and say I want something different, but what I want to do is go into this place 2D texture node here, and this will globally change things like repetition and rotation. So if I go to repeat UV and I set it to 5 by 5, for instance, can you see it's repeating this texture 5 times? This is when you can start to see where the texture's been repeated, because you've got 2 white bricks there, and therefore 2 white bricks there, 2 white bricks there. It becomes a little bit obvious. Let's just do this 10 by 10. Right, so you start to see these patterns that are repeated in it. I'll put that down to 2 by 2. So this is good if you just want to make sort of big gross adjustments. I can rotate this UV, so I can get this, drag it, or type in 90 degrees. So if I wanted completely vertical bricks, I'd do that. These obviously need changing now. So that's basic. That's like the most simplest way of UV mapping. It's by using these UV shells and moving them to the correct places. Now the limitation with this is, in fact, I think the best way to show it is by making a sphere. So here's my sphere. I'm going to assign it this brick texture, so all I need to do is right click, existing material, brick. Alright, so there it is. It's actually done a reasonably okay job. So let's go to UV. So when we're in the UV editor, so let's go back to the UV editor. It's here. I can tell it what type of projection to do here. I can also do it up here as well. I can go to UV, and let's do it automatic, because I mean automatic worked really well for that. Let's try it with this. So object mode, UV, automatic. Can you see how it cuts this up? It's not very nice, because each of these cameras is having to decide on how far down here it stops before this camera takes over. So it's actually cut it really quite poorly. So this is when it doesn't work very well. And as you can see, in fact, let's render that. So render that monstrosity. You can clearly see where each camera has finished and the other one's taking over. So this is why you can't rely on, I mean, it looks pretty cool, doesn't it? But this is why you can't rely on automatic mapping all the time. So in a case for this, we'd actually start cutting these ourselves. Instead of getting Maya to cut them, so it's cut out this area, this one, this one. So instead of getting Maya to decide where it cuts, we can cut it ourselves. So I've applied another texture onto this. I've made it look really over the top, just so you can actually see the pattern on it. So I'm going to go into object mode. I'm going to just do, I think it's already got an automatic projection on it. That's pretty nasty, isn't it? Okay, well, it doesn't matter. We can mix and match projections. We don't need to just stick to one. So let's say this one, and this one. we want to do is camera based. So it means when it's camera based, it's going to take the projection from wherever the camera is looking at. So I can go UV camera based. Can you see? And that's now lined up with the camera. Or I can do it again here if I wanted to. UV camera based. See? So that's one way of actually breaking this down into easier chunks. I'm just going to go back to automatic. Now in this, let's say I want these lines going up this building and down here. Okay, so I can go into the UV editor. So UV editor, and it's showing me all these UVs that it's cut out. Not sure what that is exactly. See, again, this is why we can't trust it 100,000,000%. What is handy is we can, if we click on this, it will colour them all. And when we've seen it on the model, it actually makes a little bit easier to see. And if we right click this, it will, every single one we cut out, it'll assign a different colour to. So you can really see what's attached and what isn't. So it's made its own one for this, UV shell for that. So each shell is in a different colour. Right, okay, so let's see. We're going to have to do some cutting with this. So let's take this yellow one, right? So I'm going to take this yellow. I'm going to go into UV shell, press E for rotate, and I'm going to rotate this. It's going to be difficult to see actually. Let's turn off that colour. There we go for the time being. Turn it off completely. I'm going to rotate this. Hopefully you can see that. So now that line is following up there quite nicely like I want it. But because this is attached to this, this line continues going up instead of coming back down this way. And this is when we need to cut it for ourselves. So it's quite straightforward to do. I'm going to zoom right in. I'm going to go into edge mode, like that. I'm going to click on, God, that's a very, very small edge. Right, I'm going to click on, I'm going to double click actually, so that's selected that entire edge going from top to bottom. Let's look in here. Ooh, that's not so good. Never mind. So I've basically, I've selected one edge which will go all the way through it. I'm going to press F to focus on it, and now I'm just going to cut it, and it's dead easy. I'm going to go through here and press cut, and it'll make a white line, and it'll show that this is actually now two different UV shells. I can stick the colour back on, hopefully to show that. So UV shell, I can click on this now, and I can move this independently. I've basically just cut it free from that. So now if I want to, I can rotate this as well and have it lining up this way. So when we see it in the viewport, let's turn off that colour. Let's go into object mode. Right, so can you see now this follows up this way and this one comes down this way. So again, it's just a little bit closer towards having some control. But the next so the next video I'll do is actually showing how you can just cut this, the entire thing manually.